Snow fell over Manhattan like a memory that refused to fade, soft, endless, and achingly silent. From the 48th floor of the glass tower that bore his name, Ethan Cole watched the city vanish under white. The skyline, his skyline, was a crown of light dissolving into fog. Inside the penthouse, everything gleamed with precision and emptiness. The crystal decanter untouched on the bar, the marble floors spotless, the Christmas tree still wrapped in its box beside the window. For 3 years, Ethan had promised himself he would unpack it. And for 3 years, he hadn't. The only sound came from the muted crackle of the fireplace, more decoration than warmth. Ethan sat on the edge of the leather armchair, staring at the flame's reflection in his tumbler. The whiskey trembled with the faint vibration of the city below, golden and still. He took a sip, letting the burn distract him from the echo that lived in his chest, the one left behind when Clara died. Clara had loved Christmas. She used to fill their home with soft carols and cinnamon candles, coaxing him from his spreadsheets and meetings to hang ornaments together. "One day," she used to say, "you'll realize glass towers don't hold memories. Hearts do." He had laughed then, believing love was something that waited patiently while he built empires. But empires didn't hold you when you broke. The clock struck 9. Its chime rolled through the vast room like an accusation. Ethan exhaled and leaned back, his gaze catching on the reflection in the glass, his own face, older, harder, unrecognizable. That was when the first sound came, a single, sharp ring of the doorbell. It startled him. No one came here unannounced, he ignored it. Probably the concierge, a mistake, or some delivery sent to the wrong floor. But then it came again, longer this time, the echo stretching into the marble silence. Still, he didn't move. He had learned to silence the world's knocks. Yet the third ring was different. It wasn't polite. It wasn't patient. It was desperate. He rose slowly, setting the glass down beside a framed photo of Clara. Her eyes seemed to follow him as he crossed the room. The elevator light outside flickered red against the snow beyond the window. When he opened the heavy oak door, the cold punched through the warmth, scattering flakes across the marble floor. 2 children stood there. A girl and a boy, no older than 10, wrapped in threadbare coats dusted with snow. Their cheeks were raw from wind, their small hands trembling around a frayed canvas bag. The girl stepped forward first. Her voice was steady, though her lips quivered. "Please, sir," she said. "You're the only one left who can help us." Behind her, the boy clutched something to his chest, a small, dented music box. Its lid hung crooked, and as he shifted, it let out a fragile, broken tune. The sound froze Ethan where he stood. The melody was cracked, barely holding together, but it carried through the hall like a ghost from another life. It was the same lullaby Clara used to hum when she thought he wasn't listening, a simple Czech tune she'd found at a market on their honeymoon. He hadn't heard it since the night she died. His throat tightened. "Where did you get that?" he asked, the words scraping out like sandpaper. The boy hesitated, looking up at him with wide, cautious eyes. "It was our mother's," he said softly. "She told us. If things ever got bad, we should find you." Ethan's pulse faltered. The girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges damp from the snow. She held it out with both hands. "She said you'd remember." The handwriting on the front stopped him cold. Elegant, looping letters. For Ethan, the snow outside hissed against the windows as if urging him to open it, but his hands wouldn't move. He could only stare at the children, their faces pale, their breath forming clouds in the cold air, the music box wheezing its dying melody. Behind them, the city blurred into white. The door stood open, snow spilling inside. Ethan could have sent them away, called security, closed his world again. But something, maybe the echo of Clara's laughter, maybe the ghost in that melody, made him step aside. "Come in," he said quietly. They did, and in that single moment, the silence that had ruled his life cracked. Just enough for something new, something fragile and alive, to enter. The elevator doors shut behind them with a low hum, sealing away the sound of the storm. Inside, warmth returned, soft amber light washing over the polished marble floors, the scent of oak and ash lingering in the air. The two children stood awkwardly in the vast living room, dwarfed by its silence. Their boots left small, wet prints on the marble, melting snow forming trembling puddles like scattered tears. Ethan closed the door gently, his mind still reeling. The girl, Emma, held herself with quiet bravery, her chin lifted though her eyes shimmered with exhaustion. Beside her, Noah stood a half-step behind, clutching the worn bag and the crooked music box as if both were lifelines. "You can sit," Ethan said, gesturing toward the couch. His voice sounded rough, unused. He couldn't remember the last time he'd invited anyone in, let alone strangers, let alone children. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, sir." She guided her brother forward, her small hand resting protectively on his shoulder. The moment they sat, the boy's shoulders sagged with relief. Ethan noticed how thin they were beneath their coats, how their gloves had been darned and redarned until the fabric looked like lace. "Where are your parents?" Ethan asked quietly, though his gut already twisted with dread. Emma glanced at Noah, then down at her hands. "Our mother's sick," she said. "She hasn't moved all day. The clinic said they can't help unless we pay. We tried everywhere," her voice faltered. "We came because—" "She told us you could." Ethan frowned. "Me?" She nodded. "She said you'd understand." Before he could ask more, Noah unzipped the bag and pulled out a folded note, the one from the doorway. "This," he murmured. "It's from her." Ethan unfolded it carefully. The paper was creased and faintly stained from water. The handwriting hit him first, graceful, looping, familiar. His heart stuttered. Clara's handwriting. He read the single line. "If they find you, it means it's time to remember who you were." He froze. His mind splintered with the sound of Clara's voice, the soft laugh she used to have when he buried himself in work. "Time to remember who you were." The words pressed down on him like a weight from another world. "Who gave you this?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Emma's gaze lifted to meet his. "A lady named Clara. She came to the shelter every week before Christmas. She brought books and blankets. She said she used to live high above the city too, but her heart lived down here." Ethan stumbled back a step, gripping the edge of the counter. The world tilted slightly. Clara, his Clara, gone 3 years, and yet somehow, impossibly, she had touched these children's lives. "Did she ever tell you her last name?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Emma shook her head. "Just Miss Clara. She said if we ever got lost, to find the man who once built towers taller than his heart." The line cut through him. He had said those exact words to Clara once, half joking, half confessing. She had promised to never let him forget them. And now, even from the grave, she was keeping that promise. The fireplace crackled behind him, the only sound in the vast room. Outside, the snow thickened, swirling like ash from some celestial fire. Ethan forced himself to steady his breath. "You must be freezing," he said, moving to the cabinet. He returned with 2 blankets, draping one over each of them. The gesture felt unfamiliar, his hands clumsy, unpracticed in tenderness. Yet when Emma whispered, "Thank you," something in his chest eased for the first time in years. Noah turned the music box over in his small hands. "It's broken," he said softly. "She told us it plays when you're not alone anymore." He wound it once. Nothing. Just a faint click. Ethan stared at the silver etching along its sides, small lilies and stars. Exactly like the one Clara used to keep by her bedside. "She gave you that?" "Yes," Emma said. "She said one day, the man she loved would hear it again." Ethan sank into the armchair opposite them. His reflection stared back from the window, split between the storm outside and the glow within. For the first time, the penthouse didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a tomb that had just been disturbed. Emma looked around the vast space, the empty shelves, the unlit tree still boxed in the corner. "It's beautiful here," she said softly, "but it feels sad." Ethan met her gaze, and in her simple words, something cracked inside him. He looked toward the untouched box in the corner, the one that still held their old ornaments. Clara's handwriting marked it too. For when we start again. Maybe this was what she meant all along. Not about Christmas, not about forgiveness, but about starting again, even in the cold. He stood slowly, the faintest trace of life returning to his voice. "All right," he said. "Tell me where your mother is." The children looked up, startled. "We're going to help her," he continued. "Now. Tonight." Outside, the wind howled, pressing against the glass. But inside, for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Cole moved with purpose. Not for profit, not for pride, but for something he thought he'd lost forever. The broken music box clicked once more, its gears catching faintly as if trying to remember the tune. The city had surrendered to the storm. Snow whirled through the avenues like sheets of torn silk, swallowing neon lights and muffling the noise that once made Manhattan feel alive. But inside Ethan Cole's car, there was only the low hum of the engine and the whisper of 2 frightened children breathing in the back seat. The windshield wipers carved half-moons of clarity through the blizzard, revealing glimpses of a city that seemed to dissolve the farther they drove. The twins sat close together, wrapped in Ethan's spare coat, their silhouettes small against the leather seats. Between them sat the music box, its broken tune long silent, but its presence constant, like a heartbeat waiting to return. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. His mind churned through disbelief, through grief, through the ghosts that rode quietly in the car with them. Clara's name still rang in his head, the way Emma had said it so innocently, as if she hadn't just upended his entire world. "A lady named Clara. She said to find you." He cleared his throat, his voice quieter than the snow outside. "How did you know where I lived?" Noah spoke for the first time since they left the apartment. "She told us you lived where the sky touches the ground." His words were matter-of-fact, but the simplicity of them lodged deep inside Ethan's chest. That was exactly what Clara had said the first night they moved into the penthouse. "We live in the clouds now," she had laughed. "But don't forget the ground is where hearts belong." He swallowed hard and focused on the road. They passed a row of dark storefronts, the kind he used to buy out without thinking. Pharmacies, laundromats, tiny cafes. All closed now, their lights gone out one by one as the storm thickened. For the first time he noticed how empty they looked, how forgotten. The boy's voice cut through the quiet again. "Sir, are we close?" Ethan nodded. "The pharmacy on 12th and Lenox. It's small, but the owner's an old friend. She won't turn us away." Emma's gaze lingered on him in the rearview mirror, cautious but curious. "Did you and Miss Clara live here before?" His fingers tightened on the wheel. "Yes, we used to." "She always talked about you," Emma said softly. "She said you built beautiful things. She said your hands made cities." The compliment hit like a bruise. "Maybe they did," he murmured. "But they also destroyed a few." The girl frowned, not understanding. Ethan didn't explain. How could he tell a 10-year-old that the very buildings he'd raised to the clouds had cast shadows long enough to bury people like her mother? When they finally pulled up to the pharmacy, the sign flickered weakly, open 24 hours, though it looked more like a promise than a fact. The storm howled around them as they stepped out, snow clinging to their hair and lashes. A small bell above the door chimed when Ethan pushed it open. Inside, the warmth smelled of old wood and rubbing alcohol. Shelves sagged with dusty bottles and handwritten labels. From behind the counter, a voice called, "Be with you in a second." An older woman emerged, sharp eyes, gray hair tied back beneath a knitted cap. "Ethan Cole," she said after a moment's study. "Haven't seen you since the mayor's fundraiser. What brings you here in this weather?" Ethan exhaled. "Medicine. For their mother." He gestured to the children. "Clara sent them." The woman's expression softened immediately. "Ah, Clara, sweet woman. She always brought donations for the shelter." She turned to the twins. "I kept her list just in case. Fever reducers, antibiotics, vitamins," she said to keep them ready. Ethan blinked, stunned. She told you that? The woman nodded as she filled a brown paper bag. Every December. Said she might not be around, but you'd come someday. For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The air thickened around him, heavy with memory. Clara had been preparing this for years, as though she'd known he would need something to wake him from the sleep he'd mistaken for life. Mrs. Patel handed the bag to Emma. No charge. Clara paid ahead. Ethan tried to protest, but she shook her head. Don't insult her memory, Mr. Cole. She believed in kindness that costs nothing. When they stepped back into the storm, the world had changed again. Snowflakes glittered under the streetlights like fragments of shattered stars. Ethan opened the car door for the twins, his movements gentler now, deliberate. Why are you helping us? Noah asked, his small voice trembling. Ethan paused before answering. Because someone I loved told me to. As he pulled onto the empty street, the car's headlights cut through the snow like a promise. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole wasn't running from his ghosts. He was following them. The storm deepened as they crossed into the poorer side of the city, a part of Manhattan Ethan had once only seen from behind tinted windows. Snow blanketed the streets so completely that the sidewalks looked erased. Streetlights flickered, their halos dim and uneven, while shadows of half-shuttered storefronts loomed like silent witnesses. The wipers squealed across the windshield, fighting a losing battle against the white. Ethan leaned forward, squinting to see through the fogged glass. The heater hummed low, and in the back seat the twins huddled together beneath one of his wool coats. The paper bag of medicine rested between them, the only fragile hope they carried. Ethan's phone buzzed on the console, a notification from his board of directors, reminding him of tomorrow's meeting. A billion-dollar merger, a deal he had spent months orchestrating. He swiped the screen dark. The world that had once defined him felt small now, almost irrelevant compared to the two tiny lives breathing quietly in his car. Emma watched the world blur past her window. It looks like the sky forgot to stop crying, she whispered. Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Maybe it's trying to wash something clean, he said, surprised at the softness in his own voice. When they finally reached the narrow block of tenements, the roads were little more than frozen veins. A flickering street lamp cast light on a crumbling stairway. Ethan parked, stepping into snow that swallowed his shoes. This way, Emma said, leading him toward a building whose door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the hallway smelled of damp wood and old smoke. A single bulb buzzed overhead. The children climbed the stairs two at a time, their small boots thudding softly against the worn steps. Ethan followed, his expensive coat brushing against walls streaked with peeling paint and forgotten graffiti. Every sound seemed to echo with accusation. You built towers, and this is what fell beneath them. When they reached the top floor, Emma pushed open a door that groaned in protest. The apartment was barely more than one room, a sagging couch, a flickering lamp, a pile of blankets on the floor. The air was cold enough to see their breath. On the bed lay a woman, thin, motionless, her skin as pale as the snow outside. Mom? Noah's voice cracked as he ran to her side. The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, until they landed on Ethan. For a long, silent moment, neither of them spoke. There was something in her gaze that tugged at the back of his memory. Something familiar. She tried to speak, but her voice broke into a rasp. Emma knelt beside her, holding the paper bag. We got your medicine, Mom. Mr. Cole helped us. The woman's cracked lips formed the faintest smile. Ethan Cole, she whispered, tasting the name as if it carried a story. Clara. She said you'd come. The sound of his wife's name in that room felt like the world tilting. Ethan stepped closer, stunned. You knew my wife? Her hand trembled as she reached for his. Her fingers were cold, fragile as paper. She helped us. After the accident, she said faintly. Told me stories about you. Said you were lost, but your heart was still good. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. When did you last see her? The woman's gaze drifted toward the window, where snow pressed against the glass like a ghost trying to look in. A few weeks before her breath hitched. She promised she'd come back with hope. Then she was gone. Noah looked up, tears shining. She used to bring us warm soup, he said. And books. She said Mr. Cole built castles in the sky but forgot to leave a door for love to come in. The words hit him like a blade wrapped in truth. He knelt beside the bed, his eyes tracing the faded photo on the nightstand, Clara's handwriting on the back, for my brave ones. Never stop believing. His heart squeezed painfully. Clara had been here, in this broken home, reaching for the world he'd ignored. The woman coughed weakly, gripping his hand. She asked me to give you something if I ever saw you. From beneath her pillow, she pulled a small envelope, the edges worn, Clara's name written across the front in her elegant script. For Ethan, when the snow returns. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sentence, written in her unmistakable looping cursive. If they find you, it means you've been given another chance. Don't close the door this time. His eyes blurred. The room seemed to breathe around him, the hum of the lamp, the faint whistle of wind through the cracks in the window, the steady heartbeat of two children watching him silently. He set the note down gently and looked at the woman. Rest, he said softly. I'll make sure you and your children are safe. I promise. Her eyes filled with tears. You sound like her, she whispered, before drifting into uneasy sleep. Outside, the storm howled again, but this time its cry felt different. Less of a warning, more of a cleansing. Ethan stood by the window, staring into the white blur of the night. Somewhere beyond the snow, Clara's spirit moved quietly, weaving the lives she'd touched back toward one another. For the first time since her death, Ethan Cole felt the stirrings of something he'd thought he'd buried forever. Purpose. Morning didn't come gently. It crept through the cracks in the curtains, spilling pale light across the peeling walls like a hesitant apology. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a city swaddled in silence and white. Ethan sat by the window, still wearing his coat from the night before, watching steam rise from the cup of coffee Mrs. Patel had insisted he take. It had gone cold hours ago. The twins slept curled together on the worn couch, wrapped in one of his blankets. Their breathing was soft, steady, a fragile kind of peace that only children who have known fear can manage. The woman on the bed, their mother, rested quietly now, color beginning to creep back into her cheeks. The medicine had done its work. Still, Ethan could hear Clara's name echoing through every heartbeat of the night before, through the letter now folded neatly in his pocket. If they find you, it means you've been given another chance. Don't close the door this time. He turned the words over and over in his mind like prayer beads. Clara had written them knowing he'd resist, knowing the fortress he'd built around himself was thicker than concrete. And yet, she had also known how to reach him, through kindness, through need, through innocence. Ethan stood, stretching stiff limbs. His body ached, but something deeper inside him was waking, a warmth that wasn't physical. He walked to the small dresser where a cracked photo frame leaned against the wall. Inside was a picture of Clara, smiling, wind-tangled hair, her arm around the very same woman sleeping now. They stood in front of a small community center. The sign above read, "The Haven Shelter, founded by Clara Cole." He nearly dropped the frame. Clara had built a shelter, their shelter. He had once dismissed the idea as her little passion project, something she did between charity galas. But this wasn't charity. This was life. She had built a refuge for people like this woman, for children like Emma and Noah. While he was closing deals in glass towers, Clara had been out here creating something that breathed. The sound of movement broke his trance. Emma rubbed her eyes, blinking into the light. "Mr. Cole?" He turned. "Good morning," she smiled sleepily. "Mom's breathing better. I think she's going to be okay," he nodded. "She will be. We'll make sure of it." Noah stirred, sitting up beside his sister. The music box lay on the table between them, glinting faintly in the morning light. "It still won't play," he said. "But she said it only works when people remember." Ethan crouched beside them. "Then maybe," he said softly, "we just need to help it remember." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver keychain, a broken watch charm Clara had once loved. It had stopped the night she died, its tiny gears frozen. He placed it next to the music box. She used to hum that tune every Christmas, he whispered. Said it reminded her that time doesn't stop when people leave, it only changes how it moves. Emma tilted her head. Then maybe she's still here. The innocence in her voice hit him harder than any sermon could. He smiled faintly. Maybe she is. The apartment door creaked open suddenly, and Mrs. Patel appeared, wrapped in a thick scarf, her cheeks flushed from the cold. You didn't come back last night, she scolded gently. The news said roads were closed. Ethan stood quickly. I stayed to make sure they were safe. Her eyes softened. Then you did what she would have wanted. He hesitated. You mean Clara? Mrs. Patel nodded. She never stopped believing you'd come back to your heart someday. She told me once, Ethan builds homes for people's bodies. I just hope one day he'll build one for his soul. The words struck deep, and for a moment, Ethan couldn't reply. He looked toward the sleeping woman, the twins, the faint light filtering through the frost-lined glass. Maybe Clara had built that home after all, brick by invisible brick, right here, in the lives she'd left behind. The morning passed in quiet rhythm. He brewed tea on a dented stove, fixed the broken latch on the door, called a doctor friend to arrange proper care. It felt strange, moving through the space not as a guest, but as if he belonged there. Every act of help felt like repairing something in himself. When the doctor arrived hours later, he pulled Ethan aside. She'll recover, but she needs rest and nourishment. They've been barely surviving. Ethan nodded, his jaw set. They won't be alone again. I'll see to that. As the doctor left, Emma tugged at his sleeve. Mr. Cole, she said shyly. Mom said before she got sick, Miss Clara told her to bring us somewhere important. She said it would help you remember something good. He knelt to her height. Where? Emma glanced at her brother. She said to show you tomorrow morning, when the snow stops. Outside, sunlight glimmered on the untouched snow, the city slowly waking beneath its new white skin. Ethan followed her gaze. All right, he said quietly. Tomorrow morning. When he looked back at the children, they were smiling, their first true smile since he'd met them. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt the faint hum of music where silence used to live. The broken music box clicked once. Then again. A single note, soft but unmistakable, filled the air, fragile, uncertain, and beautiful. Dawn broke over the city like a quiet confession, soft gold spreading across the frozen skyline. The blizzard had spent itself overnight, leaving Manhattan reborn under a clean, blinding blanket of snow. Every rooftop sparkled like glass. Every street shimmered in silence. The world looked new, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt as if he could breathe again. He'd spent the early morning clearing the frost from the car windshield, the twins watching from the window, their breath fogging the glass as they traced shapes into it. Behind them, their mother slept peacefully, her fever broken, her breathing strong and even. The night had passed like a long-held breath finally released. When Emma and Noah came running down the steps, their laughter caught him off guard. It was the kind of sound that felt out of place in his world of contracts and boardrooms, a sound that reminded him what hope actually sounded like. Are we still going? Noah asked, tugging his scarf tighter. To the place Mom said? Ethan nodded. If the roads are clear enough, yes. Emma climbed into the front seat beside him, her face bright with anticipation. She said it's where everything began. The words settled over him like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Where everything began. He didn't know where they were leading him, but Clara's name hummed quietly beneath every thought, like a melody he couldn't get out of his head. As they drove through the waking city, Ethan couldn't help but notice the small things he'd never paid attention to before. The old man feeding pigeons on the steps of a church, the child dragging a sled through the slush, the street vendor wiping frost from his cart. Life, stubborn and imperfect, refused to stop. The twins gave directions in soft bursts. Left at the bakery that smells like cinnamon. Past the bridge with the red lights. Right by the tall fence. They spoke like they were guiding him through memory rather than streets. Finally, the car slowed in front of a set of tall iron gates dusted with frost. A faded sign hung crookedly, Greenwood Cemetery. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened. "This is where your mother wanted to go?" Emma nodded solemnly. "She said it's important to you too." He stared at the gates for a long moment. The air around them seemed to hold its breath. Then, quietly, he said, "All right." The gates groaned open, their hinges squealing like reluctant witnesses. The path beyond was blanketed in untouched snow, lined with skeletal trees and marble angels wearing crowns of frost. The silence there wasn't empty. It was full, alive, heavy with memory. Ethan parked by the edge of the path, the tires crunching against the ice. The twins got out first, their boots sinking into snow up to their ankles. Lucky, their husky bounded ahead, leaving a scatter of paw prints behind. They walked in silence. The cold bit through Ethan's gloves, but he didn't mind. His breath fogged the air, each exhale a small ghost of its own. The twins led him through rows of weathered stones until they stopped before one polished marble headstone. When he saw the name, his knees nearly gave way. Clara Cole, beloved wife, friend, and keeper of light. The world blurred. He hadn't been here since the funeral. He couldn't. He had paid for the best monument money could buy, then buried his heart beneath it. Now, standing here with two small children who whispered her name like a prayer, he realized money had never built anything that could outlast love. Emma knelt first, brushing snow away from the stone with her mittened hands. "She always said this place wasn't sad," she whispered. "She said it was where love remembers itself." Ethan's breath caught. "You've been here before?" Noah nodded. "Every Christmas Eve, she told us stories about you." He felt the air leave his lungs. "What kind of stories?" "She said," Emma began softly, "that once there was a man who could build anything, except a home for his own heart. So she built one for him and she filled it with people who needed light." Ethan's vision blurred. He knelt beside the grave, snow soaking through his coat. His gloved hand brushed the carved letters of her name. The stone was cold, but it hummed with something living, something that refused to fade. "She said we were part of that home," Noah continued quietly. "That someday you'd come looking for her, and you'd find us instead." A sound escaped Ethan, half laugh, half sob. The wind carried it away. He bowed his head. "Clara," he whispered. "You never stopped believing I could change, even when I didn't." Emma placed the music box on the snow before the grave. The wind lifted her hair as she wound it gently. For a heartbeat, nothing happened, just the whisper of wind through the trees. Then slowly, miraculously, the gears caught. A soft, trembling melody began to play. Ethan froze. The tune, the same lullaby Clara used to hum under her breath, the one that had haunted his dreams, rose into the cold air, fragile but pure. The children watched him silently as the sound wrapped around them like light through frost. Tears blurred the world into colorless streaks. He felt as if time had folded over itself, past and present meeting in this single, unbearable grace. He closed his eyes and listened until the last note faded into the snow. When he opened them, the world was changed. The grave didn't look like an ending anymore. It looked like a doorway. Ethan turned to the twins, his voice raw but steady. "Take me to your mother," he said. "There's more I need to understand." The children exchanged a glance, then nodded. As they walked back toward the gates, the music box glinted faintly under the morning sun, still ticking softly, as if Clara herself had wound it, one last time, from wherever love goes when it refuses to die. The drive back from Greenwood Cemetery felt like crossing the border between two worlds, one silent and sacred, the other restless and alive. The snow was melting into silver rivers that trickled down the gutters, catching the pale sunlight in shimmering threads. Manhattan was waking up again, but Ethan Cole wasn't the same man who had left it an hour ago. He drove slowly, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the folded letter Clara had left inside his coat pocket. The twins sat in the back, quiet now, their eyes half closed as if they too could feel the weight of something invisible yet vast moving between them. the ghost of a woman who had never really gone. When they reached the narrow tenement street again, the city noise returned, horns, distant sirens, the hum of life. The building looked smaller now, fragile, yet somehow sacred. Inside, warmth greeted them, the kind that came not from heat, but from the sound of someone breathing. Their mother, Carla, was awake. She sat propped against the pillows, color returning to her cheeks. Her eyes, deep brown, bright even through fatigue, found Ethan as soon as he entered. For a moment, neither spoke. It was as if both were waiting for the other to bridge the chasm between the past and the unbearable now. "You came back," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "I said I would." Carla's gaze drifted toward the twins, who immediately ran to her, wrapping her in their small arms. She smoothed their hair, then looked back to Ethan. "They told me where you went." "We visited Clara," he said quietly. The name carried no pain now, only reverence. Tears filled her eyes. She loved that place, said it was where she went to think about hope. Ethan stepped closer. "You knew her well." Carla nodded, her expression folding into something bittersweet. "Better than most. I met her at the shelter years ago. I was pregnant, scared, and alone. The world had already decided what kind of woman I was. But Clara," her voice trembled, "she never looked at me with pity. She looked at me like I was still worth something." The words made Ethan's throat tighten. "She told me nothing," he murmured, almost to himself. "She wouldn't," Carla said gently. "She said your world was too loud for her kind of work. She didn't want your guilt to taint her giving. She said love should never need permission to be kind." Ethan swallowed hard, guilt mixing with awe. "She changed your life." "She saved it," Carla said simply. "When I fell ill, she took the twins in and promised she'd make sure they never ended up forgotten like me. She called them her second chance." She looked up at him then, directly, unflinchingly. "You were her first." The silence that followed was heavy but alive, vibrating with memory. "She told me once," Carla continued, "that she wished she could show you this side of the world, the one that doesn't measure worth in glass and steel. She said maybe one day, if you opened your door again, she'd send someone to remind you." Ethan's eyes burned. "And she did," he whispered. "She sent them," Emma smiled faintly from her mother's side. "She said he'd find us when the snow fell and the music played again." The music box sat on the table beside the bed, its silver edges glinting softly in the dim light. Ethan picked it up, turning it in his hands. "It started working this morning," he said quietly. Carla smiled through tears. "Then you must have finally listened." He looked at her, at the children, at the shabby room that somehow felt more alive than any penthouse he'd ever owned. "I have money," he said slowly. "Resources, connections. But none of it means anything if it can't heal what's broken. Clara knew that before I did." He paused, the decision forming like dawn behind his eyes. "I want to rebuild the shelter she started, expand it. A place for families like yours. Safe, warm, permanent. I'll name it after her." Carla's lips trembled. "She'd like that." Emma reached for his hand. "Will we help too?" Ethan's mouth curved into the first true smile in years. "You'll be the heart of it." The room seemed to glow a little brighter. Snowlight pooled through the thin curtains, and somewhere outside, church bells rang faintly in the distance. Carla looked toward the sound. "Christmas morning," she said softly. Ethan exhaled, feeling something inside him finally settle. "Then maybe," he murmured, "this is the first one that really means something." The twins leaned into him, one on each side, their warmth grounding him in a way he hadn't known he needed. He glanced down at the letter still clutched in his coat pocket, Clara's looping handwriting pressing faintly against the fabric. "Don't close the door this time." He looked around the tiny room. Cracked walls, flickering lamp, 2 sleeping children, 1 recovering mother, and felt the truth of it surge through him like sunlight after years of storm. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of hers, living through him. As he left later that night, the music box played once more, its notes drifting after him down the hallway. He paused at the threshold, the cold air meeting his face. For a long moment, Ethan simply stood there, hand on the doorknob, realizing that for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone. Outside, the snow had started falling again, softer this time, like applause from the heavens. The first dawn of the new year rose over Manhattan like a promise finally kept. The snow had softened into slush along the curbs, and the city, that cold, magnificent machine of ambition, was stirring back to life. But inside the haven, a small brick building once forgotten by time, something far greater than noise or commerce was awakening. The sign above the doorway had been freshly repainted that morning in deep gold letters, "The Clara Haven, a home for lost hearts." Ethan stood at the entrance, hands buried in his coat pockets, breath fogging in the crisp air. Behind him, children's laughter spilled from inside, a melody richer than any symphony the city could ever compose. Emma and Noah were in the courtyard chasing Lucky, their husky, through shallow snowbanks. Their mother, Carla, sat nearby, healthier now, smiling as she folded donated blankets. Every sound, every color, felt brighter here, as though the world had finally remembered how to breathe. It had taken months of tireless work to reach this day. Ethan had sold the penthouse, liquidated properties, and redirected his empire's heart into this place. His name no longer shone on towers. It lived in whispers, in stories, in kindness that moved quietly through the streets. His board had called him reckless, sentimental, ruined. He didn't care. For the first time in his life, he wasn't building for profit. He was building for purpose. Inside, the hall smelled of cinnamon and fresh paint. Strings of paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, a creation of the neighborhood children. A small wooden plaque near the front desk bore a quote in Clara's handwriting, taken from one of her old journals that Carla had found tucked away in a box of donated clothes. "Wealth is what you keep in your hands. Grace is what you give away." Ethan traced the letters with his fingertips. His reflection shimmered faintly in the polished brass. Not the man he once was, the one who lived above the clouds, but someone softer, steadier, reborn. Marie, the new director, once a nurse at the same shelter Clara had founded, approached him with a clipboard and a grin. "We have 36 families signed up for tonight's meal," she said. "More are coming from Queens and the Bronx, word spreading fast." Ethan smiled. "Then we'd better make more soup." She hesitated before speaking again. "You know, she'd be proud of this. Of you," he nodded, his throat tightening. "I hope she is. I hear her everywhere, in the way people talk here, the way they help each other without asking. It's like she never left." As evening fell, the building filled with warmth and noise. Children playing near the fire, volunteers serving food, musicians strumming guitars by the window. And among it all, the twins stood proudly beside a small glass case on the mantel. Inside it rested the silver music box, restored and gleaming. When Emma wound it, the familiar tune drifted through the air, clear, steady, no longer broken. The melody carried across the hall, finding Ethan where he stood by the window, watching the snow begin again outside. It seemed lighter now, slower, as though even the storm had learned gentleness. He closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. In the fragile song, he could almost hear her voice, Clara's, soft and certain. "You found it, Ethan. The light never left. You just had to open the door." A tear slipped down his cheek, not of sorrow but gratitude. He whispered into the air, "Thank you, Clara, for not giving up on me." When he turned back, Noah was holding a stack of papers, sketches for an expansion of the shelter. "Mr. Cole, look! We drew a new building, with classrooms, and a roof garden, and a place where kids can paint." Ethan smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Looks like the next architect of New York's heart is already here." Noah grinned, and for a moment Ethan saw his younger self in those eyes, but lighter, freer, unburdened by greed. Later that night, when the lights dimmed and families began to settle into their bunks, Ethan stepped outside into the courtyard. Snow was falling again, slow and deliberate, the way it had the night two children first knocked on his door. The city glowed in the distance, alive and imperfect, its towers rising like old ghosts that no longer haunted him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Clara's final letter. Creased, worn, the ink fading but still legible. Love doesn't end. Ethan, it simply finds a new home. He looked up at the sign above the shelter's doorway, the Clara Haven, and smiled. The words of her letter lingered in his chest, beating in time with the music still echoing faintly inside. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole didn't feel like a man who had lost everything. He felt like a man who had finally found it. Snow gathered gently in his hair, the night quiet except for the laughter within and the faint hum of a lullaby carried by the wind. Somewhere beyond the storm, he felt her, not as absence but as light, guiding him still. And as the bell of the old church down the block chimed midnight, Ethan lifted his face to the sky, whispering into the falling snow, "You were right. Clara, love always finds its way home." The city exhaled around him, the music box played on, and the snow kept falling, soft, endless, and full of grace.